Guys, welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I have a phenomenal guest with me today. He decided to come on at short notice, and so we're only going to keep him on for about 15 minutes. I have Steve Grumbine with me. Steve Grumbine is a political, economic, and social justice activist. He's founder of Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action, a 501c3, 501c4, respectively dedicated to education and advocacy for modern monetary theory. He is also host of Macro and Cheese and New Untouchables. He was just scaring me with some of the episode of the next season of this. But Steve, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for joining us. And like I've told people, Steve can't see me, but we can see Steve. And I'm going to shoot him the link to this after we finish the interview. Thank you for joining me, man. Welcome to the show.
Hey, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No, absolutely. So I had questions. And when I have economic questions, you are the person who I think of. I said, what does Steve think? That's what I think to myself. Inflation. And so we've been seeing a huge amount of inflation. Now, two things are taking place. You have Joe Biden, who's spending, supposedly, at the very least, talking about spending money on an infrastructure project. And apparently there are more projects that are supposed to come after that, basically opening up the credit card or the wallet. But you also have what seems to be inflation. Now, the inflation started before Joe Biden ever got in office. I mean, just the changing in the spending patterns. But you had, I think it was like 4% inflation in regards to groceries and food items. This was like several months ago. You have inflation in real estate, significant inflation in real estate. And you even have inflation now on retail. And so the question, I guess, is twofold. I mean, inflation is usually one of those things that is associated with a huge amount of borrowing and spending and that type of stuff. And so is the amount of inflation, what is it first? I guess the question is, why is there inflation? Why is the inflation going up on the various items like this across the various sectors? And on top of that, is that going to inhibit Joe Biden from spending in the way that he wants to spend?
Yeah, great questions, man. So first things first, it will most likely impact Joe Biden because most people don't understand inflation and most people don't understand economics. So the fear of Zimbabwe and Weimar and all that stuff, unfortunately, still has it's almost like socialism. It's got a death lock on people's minds. They don't understand it. And so chances are, the congressional folks will sit there and act just as uneducated as the rest of America. And they will probably react in an unfavorable way on this. I hope that's not the case. Because what ends up happening is this: over the last year, we've been in a lockdown, a global lockdown at that. And there has been extreme impacts to the supply chain as we've had many, many people out of the workforce. Demand for a lot of things has been down. When we couldn't go around and we couldn't do stuff, I mean, airlines were giving away free seats on a plane. I mean, hotels were begging people, hey, come on in. We'll throw in a bowl of soup, come on in. Well, now that things are starting to open up and people aren't back to work yet, and there's still supply chain issues. For example, with many of the computer devices out there, semiconductors are an extreme shortage. Things like chicken are extreme shortage. Things like pool supplies, pool chemicals are at an extreme shortage. Now, that was brought on by fires and stuff down in, I think it was Louisiana. But most of this stuff is directly resulting in from supply shocks, number one, because we didn't produce enough. And you can see that by the toilet paper outages and the toilet paper runs and things like that. Well, now, as we're entering back into the world, everybody is trying to buy things. People are trying to go places. And we're not ready.
But just so we're clear, though, but that's not because the government has been giving up so much money. And with all of this money, people have just been spending so much cheddar that they've been buying real estate and they've been buying jewelry and they've been buying all of this stuff, and it's just increasing about. It's not that. It has more to do with the disruption to the various supply chains that was brought about by COVID.
Yes, that's for the retail stuff, and that's for gas and transportation. But let me tell you one very, very, very sinister one, though. So just understand this, that when states send out appraisers to houses to evaluate how much they're worth, States get tax revenue based on the estimated value of those homes. So it's in the state's best interest for those homes to be going up in value. And what happened during a pandemic? What happened during the pandemic was a lot of people lost a lot of income. A lot of people didn't have jobs. A lot of people were living on unemployment or shacking up with families, etc. So what happened to state revenues? They went down. So what you're seeing is a rampant appraisal rise in valuations of housing, and you're seeing another housing bubble starting to take place. And there's an extreme amount of control fraud, an extreme amount of fraud that backs the housing market to begin with. And nothing has changed. Not only nothing fundamentally changed, literally nothing has changed from going back to the last great financial crisis in terms of what happened with the housing market then. You could still short the housing market once again. Now, people would be wise to it, and the Fed would probably do something different. But you're watching house prices go up significantly right now.
But why are they skyrocketing like that? I mean, that's one of the other inflationary things. Like my wife, her sister, her brother was trying to get a house, and the houses were going up so high in price that it had gotten to the point where even just trying to go and see a house or have a house checked over in advance was something that was like, well, yeah, we don't have to do this because this other guy's going to buy it without seeing it. Like, why the skyrocketing prices in the way that they've skyrocketed?
Just remember, the valuations by the appraisers directly benefit the local and state governments. The local and state governments lost massive revenues during this COVID crisis.
I see. So you're trying to say that the evaluations are there in order to give states more revenue, basically to inflate their coffers.
You got it. And there's more to it than that, though, because there's an entire syndicate behind the scenes, from appraiser to mortgage lender to Wall Street. And we're talking about the Robert Rubins and all those folks that we've all known and loved over the years that have literally committed fraud. And so a lot of this housing bubble is once again another rush on homes. People are seeing their houses go up in value, so they're selling them. And then you've got people trying to buy them before they go up too high. And so you've got the same exact kind of spiraling thing going on, and it's going to eventually have the same thing happen as last time. They'll probably have some different way of reacting to it this time, because they probably, unless they're all dead, they probably learned something from the global financial crisis. But it's fraud, and it is something that is going to hurt us in the long term.
Well, I mean, at this point, we're 28 trillion in debt. So how much latitude do we have, to even respond in the way that we responded prior? I think once before we brought up the assets or something to that effect. Also,
just remember, I want to hit that word debt real quick. Debt is nothing more than the net money supply. So the actual national debt is nothing more than every untaxed dollar in the economy. That's it. So there is no really paying it back. We think of treasury bonds and stuff like that as the debt, but that's not really the debt. Every dollar is part of that debt. And so the idea of debt being high is whatever. It's really no big deal. It's nothing. It's not anything. What you should be more concerned about are sectoral balances in terms of what the state of private debt in America is, what the state of rest of world trade is, and then the state of public debt is really the one thing that doesn't matter. So public debt being the amount of money issuance. And we made a decision to sell bonds as a means of letting the rich feel good. It's a basic income for the wealthy. That's all that is. We could stop selling bonds yesterday if we wanted to. So I wouldn't worry too much about debt impacting anything. Interest rates, however, are another thing. If they decide to try to raise interest rates, that will have an effect on inflation, because that is a direct payment to bondholders, which is bringing money into the economy. And that right there could, in fact, create inflationary conditions.
Well, I guess my thing is there are already inflationary conditions currently.
On certain things,
Right.
certain products.
Right, on certain sectors.
Inflation that everybody's worried about, the one that you will worry about, is the rise in all prices, not rise in some prices, the rise in all prices. And so, the fear of like hyperinflation and things like that, those are not like real concerns, except, let's just be fair, supply shocks are usually supply shocks and corruption. Hey, the lethal mixture can create hyperinflationary conditions. We're not in any way, shape, or form tied to that, though. So there's no fear. There's none of that would impact us this way. I will tell you, though, that the housing bubble is something to keep your eye on.
Now, the real quick, for the debt, though, the reason why you're saying that the national debt is not that big of a deal has to do with, as long as it's appropriated in our own currency, we can always pay it back, basically.
That's
from, but we are.
But it's not pay it back. These are savings accounts. So think about this. When China does business with the United States, they receive U.S. dollars. What do they do with those U.S. dollars when they receive them? They keep them at the Fed. And then they have a choice. Do they just sit there, or do they buy bonds with them so they earn some interest on this money that's just sitting there? They have choices. And they may take that money and they may put it into a different currency or whatever. But usually they keep plenty of money at the Fed to facilitate their transactions with the United States. And, they may buy assets with those the money they earn, but largely they choose to take a nominal interest because that's a huge amount of money that's growing interest. But it's not growing interest in terms of something taxpayers pay back. That's just money that the government, when they sell those bonds, they already budget that interest on those bonds because they're known. It's like that's a 5-year bond. So they know over the next 5 years at this interest rate, this is how much money it will be. They already preload those. That's not something we have to pay back. It's like your bank giving you 2% interest on your savings account. It's really nothing.
It's already planned into the process.
Yes.
We don't have a huge amount of time. I would love to dig into that a little bit more. But the other part that I want to get into is Biden. So, of course, people are going to say, oh, my God, we have inflation. It might not necessarily be across the board, but it's definitely on enough sectors where it's a tax on people who are basically poor. I mean, if groceries went up even like 3-4 cents, like modest amounts, it would have adversely affected my mom and I in regards to what we could have purchased. So people are going to freak out, and they're going to say, you're giving all these people money, Joe Biden, and then giving all these people money. They're spending that money on houses. They're spending the money. Now, this is somewhat ludicrous, right? People are not just spending money on houses like that. But that's what they're going to say. And they're going to say, you can't spend money on infrastructure because we already have inflation, and it's going to make it worse. So is Joe Biden inhibited by this in real terms? Not just talking about the politics, but in real terms.
Political terms, not real terms, political terms. Because remember this, there's two things here, stocks and flows. Stocks are just money. It's not being spent. Flows are when we spend money, okay? So at the end of the day, if everybody has more money to spend on given things, then what will happen is if the production didn't meet demand, then those costs will go up. So we're in the middle of a situation right now where the production didn't keep up with the new demand, where people are having money to spend. So I think that's what you're seeing. I don't believe this is a long-term thing. I don't believe that that's the way this is structured at all. I really believe this will even out once we even out. But right now, there's a rush to everybody to get back into the swing of things, and I think that's what you're seeing.
Oh, I see. And so once it balances out, at that point, this goes away. Basically, the politics of this is difficult right now, but
yes,
over time and over the long haul, it's astonishing to me that we haven't seen. I mean, they've dropped trillions of dollars into the economy, like in the way that they were putting money in, what is it, buying back bonds or whatever, or the Fed, and we still haven't seen this rush of inflation that we've been forecasted to see.
No, again, remember, money growth is never the concern. It's always spending that is the concern. In other words, people spending. And so if we're all trying to buy healthcare and there's not enough doctors, you're going to see costs go up.
Right.
If we're all trying to buy education, there's not enough education. You see what I
Yeah,
mean?
right.
So if we're all trying to buy bread, there's not going to be and there's not enough bread, you're going to see inflation. So it's just those sorts of things that really, really drive this at this point. And I believe also there's some price gouging going on too.
Yeah.
Opportunists.
Before we close, I want to give you a chance to boost your show, Untouchables. You guys are about to do another season of it, and you've been
Yes.
scaring me, or you're scaring me earlier before we came on today. Please tell the audience about your show.
Yeah, so season 1 was all about the technocrats and the whistleblowers that were involved in Countrywide and Citibank, and we had Richard Bowen and Art Wilmarth and Michael Winston and people from the Department of Justice talking. This season is all about the victims. We've had people like Cindy Johnson, who was a gold medalist, who lost her home to fraud, and she's out there fighting it. We had guys, tons of them, tons of experience with people who have lost their homes with liar's loans, people that had loans taken out in their name that they weren't the one that did it, and then the home is gone. They made payments, but there's another loan over here that they knew nothing about, that they weren't involved in. All kinds of problems with chain of custody, you name it. And this is about to take place once again, once the mortgage bomb hits after this COVID forbearance hits. So this is very real, very here and now. It still ties, like I said in the beginning, back to the first financial crisis. So this episode, this series is going to be epic. And I hope people pay attention, because this is going to impact people you know and love. So that's, please, by all means, dial in, because this is the stuff. This is what is being perpetrated against we, the people. We are being used in a way to fatten the wallets of people that don't need their wallets fattened anymore. And we are literally being raked over the coals, and a lot of good people are going to lose their homes.
And just so we're clear, the forbearance doesn't get rid of the money that you owe. It just postpones
No, it does not.
And so
That's
if
correct.
it takes 4 months, you still owe the rent for that 4 months.
Yes,
and so
sir.
it's like, why do they think you're going to have the money in 4 months that you didn't have? And how weird is that? I mean, most people, even before COVID, was only making $18,000 a year. 42% of the population. And so it's like, if you're talking about that's astonishing. I don't know how they think those people are going to be able to pay that. Steve, thank you, man. I really appreciate this. Steve Grumbine, political, economic, and social justice activist and founder of Real Progress and Real Progress in Action, 501c3, 501c4, respectively dedicated to education, advocacy for modern monetary theory. Steve also is host of Macaroni and Cheese, and of course, the aforementioned, the new Untouchables. Steve, thank you, man. I appreciate you coming on.
You got it, brother.
Guys,
talk to you later, man.
Thanks, man. All right, guys. I want to thank all of you for joining me. I hit him up, and I was just, I was like, yo, do you have time to talk about XYZ? And he was like, yo, I'm free today. It's like, let's do it. And Steve has always been a great guest every time he's come on the show, so I appreciate him coming on. Guys, I want to thank you. I will see you a little bit later, and I'll talk to you guys in a few, about 30 minutes. Thanks all. Talk to you in a few. Bye.